He looks like he's going to come back, do some work here in Berea. Would that signify that he thinks that the competition is a little closer than it once was, and he got to get locked in and ready to go?
I think he looks at this as probably the last chance of his career. I get it. Like, yeah, it's a close competition with Shedeur, so you want. I just think that he's looking at this as like this is his last chance.
This guy's made all this money. He's done nothing for the Browns outside of played maybe one good half of football. If he can't beat out two essentially rookies who are not high draft picks, his career's over.
Yeah.
Who's going to sign this guy if you can't beat out Shedeur or Gabriel?
After this year, he's auditioning for his next role for somebody else.
Yeah.
And usually they don't tell you, hey, you go out on your own terms. They retire you.
The league retires you more often than not.
And I've known the Sanders family. I've known his brother all the way back when he was at SMU. When Coach Chad Morris, he was the coach there. I used to go out there and, I used to hang out with the team, and his brother was one of the players. So, me and his family got a good relationship, and, we always just try to pull for each other. So, we both have the opportunity to go out there and put out the best product for the team, and let Monken and the organization choose who can go out there, and we're going to support each other.
Deshaun Watson did not just walk back into Berea like a quarterback calmly preparing for another normal season. He walked back into a building where the temperature around his name has changed completely. Because this is not the same old Browns quarterback conversation anymore. This is not just about injury rehab, veteran experience, or another round of team-approved optimism. This is about a $230 million quarterback suddenly being discussed like a man fighting to keep his NFL career alive. And that is the part Cleveland cannot dress up with clean press conference language. The moment people started saying Watson needed to come back and get extra work in Berea, the whole story shifted. On the surface, it sounds responsible. Veteran quarterback gets healthy, returns to the facility, locks in, prepares for camp. That is the safe version. That is the version the Browns would probably love everyone to repeat. But underneath that, there is a much louder question sitting in the room. Why does a quarterback with Watson's contract, Watson's resume, and Watson's supposed status need to prove he can separate from Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel?
The only thought and the only chance that Deshaun Watson has of winning the job is that they want to put in a run-first offense, a scramble-first offense, a mobile, quarterback offense. Right. That's the only way that he wins it. And Deshaun Watson sunk the ship, and he's been sunk for years. The Browns need to play Shedeur Sanders and evaluate Shedeur Sanders, but that's the way that Deshaun Watson.
I think that if Deshaun Watson is further ahead and he's better today, does not preclude Shedeur Sanders from still continuing on his journey, still continue to be in top amongst his offense and getting better. If he's been getting better from the point he was last year, and they say it's night and day, why would you not think with more time and more resources and more time to sit and watch? Why, when you believe that he can still take leaps and bounds and still continue to get better?
That is where this gets dangerous. Because if the competition is closer than it was supposed to be, then Watson is not just fighting a depth chart battle. He is fighting the most embarrassing question in Cleveland football right now. Did the Browns pay $230 million for a quarterback who now has to convince people he is still better than two young players who entered the building with far less money, far less NFL experience, and way less organizational investment? That is not a small problem. That is a franchise-level headache. And that is why this quote hit so hard. The discussion was not about Watson being a little rusty. It was not about him needing time. It was not even about him being pushed in a healthy way. The point was much sharper than that. They said this might be the last chance of his career. Think about how wild that sounds when attached to Deshaun Watson. A quarterback with one of the most expensive deals in NFL history is now being talked about like someone who could be running out of road if he cannot win this Browns quarterback battle. That is the part Browns fans are reacting to because the money and the performance have never matched. Watson got the massive contract. Watson got the franchise commitment. Watson got the kind of deal that tells the whole league, this is our guy. But since he arrived in Cleveland, the results have not looked anything close to that investment. The conversation in the clip says it straight. He has made all this money and, in their view, has done almost nothing for the Browns outside of maybe one good half of football. That is a brutal line, but it lands because fans have been feeling that frustration for a long time. And now here comes Shedeur Sanders, walking into the same quarterback room with a completely different kind of energy. Shedeur does not have Watson's contract. He does not have that veteran protection. He does not have the same organizational baggage, but he does have attention. He has belief. He has fans watching every throw, every clip, every practice report, and every little sign that the Browns might have something real sitting right in front of them.
As implied, he'd like to get this solved quickly as well. One analyst suggests the Browns may have already tipped their hand, all right? Here it says, despite projections of Watson being ahead early in the process, the Browns told everyone exactly what they expect from this season when the organization traded Myles Garrett to Los Angeles Rams. If the front office planned to legitimately compete this fall because Watson was ready, looked close to Pro Bowl form from 6 years ago, and had the franchise's full support, Garrett would still be on Cleveland's roster. Instead, the Browns continue to add ammunition based on the strong possibility they will need picks to assure the acquisition of a top quarterback prospect from the 2027 class. It says it's a great point that it's tough to dispute. The underlying sentiment over the past 2 years was that 2027 was always the destination, and trading away your best player to get more ammo for that draft only adds more legitimacy to that claim. If that's the case, it makes sense why.
That is what makes this so uncomfortable for Cleveland. Because if Shedeur Sanders looks good, this is no longer just a rookie success story. It becomes a Watson problem instantly. The Browns can sell competition all they want. They can say every quarterback is pushing every quarterback. They can talk about reps, development, patience, and process. But fans are not stupid. If a young quarterback starts looking more confident, more alive, more promising, and more exciting than the $230 million man, then the whole conversation flips. Suddenly, the question is not, can Shedeur earn a role? The question becomes, are the Browns protecting Watson because of football or because of the contract? That is the nightmare scenario for the front office, because contracts do not throw touchdowns. Guaranteed money does not move the chains. Old reputation does not survive forever when a young quarterback starts making the building uncomfortable. And that is why Watson coming back to Berea can be read two ways. The team-friendly version says he is committed. The harsher version says he knows the heat is real. He knows the room is watching. He knows the fans are watching. And he knows this is not a normal comeback anymore. This is an audition, not just for Cleveland, for the entire NFL, because the league has a cold memory when the film stops helping you. The clip made that point clearly. Players usually do not get to decide when they leave on their own terms. More often, the league makes that decision for them. Teams stop calling. Coaches stop believing. Front offices stop making excuses. And when that happens, it does not matter how much money you made before. It does not matter how famous your name used to be. The NFL moves on fast. That is what makes Watson's situation so tense. If he beats out Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel cleanly, then he buys himself time. He can say he is still the veteran. He can say the job still belongs to him. He can force the Browns to keep building around the idea that he can still be useful. But if this competition stays close, or worse, if one of the young quarterbacks starts winning the eye test, Watson's whole image takes another hit.
All I would say, I think doors wide open for Shedeur. I don't think this is settled in any sort of way. And to the initial question of whether it's fair to expect that Deshaun will win the job, I don't think fair is even a thing we can do in this conversation. I think there's been a couple of things that tell us that Deshaun at least feels like he's got the leg up in this. I think him reporting today to Berea and him working out in Berea right now when this is this big stretch of time off and he's not even supposed to be anywhere close to the facility if he doesn't want to be. I think that's one sign that that Deshaun thinks that he's got a leg up on this. I think the other thing is something that happened last week. I think his wife on Instagram having that quote messaging something to the effect of how basically, they don't see all the work that you do in the shadows and all that, but your time is coming, something to that effect. When she's starting to be vocal about this and starting to puff her chest out a little bit about it, I feel like there's a lot of belief from people around Deshaun Watson that he has this job. And that's the scary part about this.
And for Cleveland, that might be even scarier than the quarterback battle itself. Because the Browns do not just need Watson to be decent. They need him to justify the biggest decision they made. They need him to look clearly better. They need him to make the debate feel silly. They need him to walk into Berea and remind everybody why they paid him like a franchise savior. But right now, the conversation is not sounding like that. It sounds like pressure. It sounds like doubt. It sounds like a veteran quarterback being warned that if he cannot beat Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel, the league may not give him another soft landing. And that is why this story is exploding. Because this is no longer about whether Deshaun Watson can simply return. This is about whether he can survive the return. The second layer of this story is the part Cleveland cannot escape, because Deshaun Watson's contract is no longer just a number attached to his name. It is the shadow hanging over the entire Browns quarterback room. Every throw, every practice clip, every report from Berea, every mention of Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel now gets compared to that $230 million decision. That is what makes this so different from a normal quarterback competition. This is not just about who looks sharp in camp. This is about whether the Browns are willing to admit that the most expensive name in the room might not be the most exciting option in the room anymore, and that is where the pressure gets uncomfortable. When a player has Watson's contract, the team cannot treat him like a regular veteran trying to earn a spot. The money changes everything. The front office has to answer for it. The coaches have to manage around it. The media has to talk around it. And the fans? They do not care about the cap sheet when the football does not look right. Fans want the best quarterback on the field, not the most expensive explanation on the roster. That is why Shedeur Sanders becomes such a dangerous presence in this whole conversation. He is not carrying the same financial burden. He is not attached to the same franchise gamble. He did not force the Browns into years of uncomfortable questions. He walks into the building with something Watson does not have right now: a clean football story, a young quarterback trying to prove people wrong, a player with confidence, a player with buzz. A player fans actually want to watch closely because every rep feels like it could mean something bigger.
He's gotten better and Watson just still hasn't taken off. Yeah, I think you look at it, how many Browns fans would rather Shedeur Sanders start for them this year? If you're picking between the two, I'd say 7 out of 10, maybe 8 out of 10 would rather have Shedeur Sanders play for them. So maybe they look at it and they go, okay, we don't know how great this season's going to be. Now, I'm not inviting the business partners and stuff in my coach's room here, but we got to think about what we're doing this year and what we're doing for the future if you're involving Andrew Berry. And I just don't see a future with Deshaun Watson. The best chance at a future is with Shedeur Sanders. So, yeah, I want Shedeur, and I think they want Shedeur to step up there and take that job. So it might be going a little bit better as planned in that regard, wouldn't it? Or am I wrong? I could end up being wrong.
And that is the exact problem for Watson. If Shedeur looks bad, the Browns can slow the story down. They can say he needs time, he is developing, he is learning, he is adjusting to the NFL speed. No major panic. But if Shedeur looks good even in flashes, suddenly every Watson mistake gets louder. Every missed throw gets judged harder. Every conservative rep becomes a question. Every positive Shedeur moment turns into pressure on the Browns to explain why the young quarterback is not getting a real shot. That is how a $230 million contract turns from protection into a trap, because the Browns cannot easily move like a normal team. A normal team could say best player wins. A normal team could let the depth chart breathe. A normal team could pivot without the entire league laughing at the old decision. Cleveland does not have that luxury. If they admit that Watson is being pushed hard by Shedeur Sanders and Gabriel, they also admit that the contract did not create the separation it was supposed to create. And that is a brutal place for any front office to live. This is why the Berea return matters so much. Watson going back to the facility to get extra work sounds like a positive headline, and in one way it is. You want your quarterback working. You want your veteran locked in. You want a player coming off injuries to be serious about his body, his timing, and his command. But the timing of the story makes it feel bigger. Because when the conversation around him is already about whether this is his last chance, extra work does not read like comfort. It reads like urgency, and urgency is not always a bad thing.
I think what you see is elite playmaking ability. That's in him. You've seen it. We've seen it. You saw it in college. You saw it on tape last year. Sure, there's a ways to go, but what rookie isn't? I mean, what first-year player doesn't have a long way to go? So I'm excited to get started with him and all of our quarterbacks and all of our players.
Sometimes pressure wakes a player up. Sometimes competition forces a veteran to sharpen everything. Sometimes a young quarterback entering the room reminds the expensive veteran that nothing is promised forever. But with Watson, the issue is that the Browns have been waiting for that version for years. They have been waiting for the comeback, waiting for the clean stretch, waiting for the game where everyone says, that is why they did it. And instead, every offseason turns into another round of hope, injury updates, contract debates, and excuses. That is why fans are not just hearing Watson is working. They are hearing Watson knows this is getting serious. And Gabriel makes the situation even harder to spin. Because this is not only a Shedeur story. If Watson was only dealing with one popular rookie, the Browns could try to frame it as hype. They could say the fan base is overreacting because Shedeur has a big name and a loyal following. But Gabriel being in the mix adds another layer. Now Watson has to look clearly better than two young quarterbacks, not just one. He cannot simply survive the competition. He has to separate. That word matters. Separate. A $230 million quarterback cannot be barely ahead. He cannot be winning by reputation. He cannot be protected by old headlines. He has to look different. He has to look sharper. He has to look like the obvious veteran in control. Because if the Browns enter camp and the reports sound like Watson, Shedeur, and Gabriel are all closer than expected, the conversation is going to explode. And that is where the team has a real problem. The contract might still influence the depth chart, but it cannot control the fan reaction. Cleveland fans have watched too much bad quarterback play to be fooled by polite language. They know when something looks real. They know when a player has juice. They know when the organization is trying to protect a decision instead of rewarding performance. So if Shedeur Sanders starts giving them hope and Watson still looks like a question mark, the noise will not calm down. It will get louder. That is the real scandal sitting underneath this story. The Browns may want Watson's return to Berea to look like leadership. They may want it to look like commitment. They may want it to look like a veteran taking control. But to a lot of fans, it looks like something else. It looks like a quarterback who understands the clock is running. It looks like a contract that can no longer hide the performance gap. It looks like a franchise trying to avoid the nightmare question. The third piece of this story is where Shedeur Sanders becomes more than just a rookie quarterback trying to earn respect. He becomes the pressure point that makes the entire Deshaun Watson situation impossible to ignore, because this is not only about Shedeur throwing passes in practice. This is about what his presence does to the room, to the fans, to the media, and to a Browns organization that already has one of the most uncomfortable quarterback investments in the entire NFL sitting on its hands. Shedeur walked into Cleveland with attention already attached to him. That is just the reality. His name brings cameras. His story brings debate. His confidence brings reaction. And whether people love it or hate it, everybody watches. That alone changes the energy inside a quarterback competition. A normal rookie can struggle quietly. A normal rookie can develop behind the scenes. A normal rookie can take reps without every little moment turning into a discussion. Shedeur Sanders does not get that kind of quiet runway. Every throw becomes a clue. Every report becomes a headline. Every positive clip becomes a problem for the veteran in front of him. And that is why Watson cannot treat Shedeur like some harmless young backup. He cannot just assume the Browns will keep the room frozen because of money. He cannot assume fans will stay patient because the front office once made a massive bet. Shedeur brings a different kind of threat. Not because he has already proven everything in the NFL, but because he gives people something Watson has not given Cleveland in a long time. Hope. That is the dangerous part. Browns fans are not just looking for a quarterback with a famous contract. They are looking for life. They are looking for spark. They are looking for somebody who makes the offense feel less heavy. And when a young quarterback enters the building with confidence, accuracy, personality, and a fan base already ready to ride with him, the veteran has to respond. He has to look clearly better, not just older. He has to look more prepared, not just more expensive. He has to make the competition feel like a formality. If he cannot do that, then Shedeur's presence starts turning into a real football problem. Because the moment Shedeur looks comfortable, the Browns lose control of the story. They can say he is developing. They can say he is learning. They can say there is a plan. But fans will not care about the plan if the kid looks more interesting than the veteran. That is how quarterback controversies start. Not always with an official announcement. Not always with a coach saying the job is open. Sometimes it starts when the crowd starts believing one player gives them more juice than the guy the organization wants everyone to accept. That is exactly why the Watson conversation is so sensitive. Cleveland does not need Shedeur to be perfect for this to become messy. He does not have to walk into camp and look like a finished franchise quarterback. He only has to look good enough to make people ask why the gap is not bigger. That is the nightmare question for Watson. Why is a $230 million veteran not clearly separated? Why is the young quarterback making the room feel tense? Why are people even allowed to say this competition might be close? And the answer is simple. Watson's play has not been strong enough to kill the debate. If Watson had come to Cleveland and played like the quarterback the contract promised, nobody would be having this conversation. Shedeur could be exciting, Gabriel could be interesting, and it still would not shake the building. But that is not the world the Browns are living in. They are living in a world where Watson's contract is massive. His availability has been questioned, his production has been disappointing, and now younger quarterbacks are standing behind him with less money and more curiosity attached to their names. That is why Shedeur is so dangerous to the Browns' comfort zone. He is not just competing against Watson's arm, he is competing against Watson's narrative. And right now, that narrative is weak. Watson's story in Cleveland has become about waiting. Waiting for health. Waiting for rhythm. Waiting for the old version. Waiting for proof. Waiting for the big comeback game. Waiting for the offense to finally look like it was worth the cost. But Shedeur's story is the opposite. His story is new. It is fresh. It is still unwritten. and fans love an unwritten story when the old one keeps disappointing them. That is how a rookie can become dangerous before he ever takes a regular season snap. And make no mistake, this is not just about hype. Hype gets people to look once, performance keeps them watching. If Shedeur struggles badly, the story slows down. But if he stacks good days, if he shows command, if he makes smart throws, if he handles pressure, if teammates respond to him, then the Browns will have a problem that no press conference can clean up. Because at that point, the fan base will not just be asking if Shedeur can play. They will be asking why Cleveland is still treating Watson like the answer. That is where the media part becomes explosive too. Local voices can try to keep the conversation safe. They can use soft phrases like good competition and healthy quarterback room. But the internet does not talk like that. Fans do not talk like that. If Shedeur starts buzzing, the conversation will get ruthless fast. People will compare every throw. They will clip every mistake. They will replay every practice report. They will turn every positive Shedeur moment into another reminder that Watson has not lived up to the deal, and Watson knows it. That is why his extra work in Berea matters. It shows urgency. It shows he understands this is not the kind of competition he can sleepwalk through. He may still have the biggest contract. He may still have the veteran label. He may still have people inside the building who want his comeback story to work. But Shedeur Sanders changes the temperature. He makes the room younger, louder, more unpredictable, and far more dangerous for a veteran who has not produced enough in Cleveland. The fourth piece of this story is where Dillon Gabriel turns this from a Shedeur Sanders headline into a full-blown Deshaun Watson problem. Because if this was only about Shedeur, the Browns could try to dismiss some of the noise as fan excitement, media hype, or name-brand attention. They could say people are overreacting because Shedeur brings a massive following and every little practice moment gets treated like breaking news. But Dillon Gabriel being in the same quarterback room makes the argument much harder to dodge. Because now Watson is not just being measured against one young quarterback. He is being measured against two. And that changes everything. For a veteran with Watson's contract, that should not be a complicated situation. A quarterback with $230 million attached to his name should not need 3 explanations, 5 qualifiers, and a whole media protection plan just to prove he belongs ahead of 2 young passers. He should walk into Berea and create distance immediately. He should look smoother, calmer, sharper, more in control, and more ready for real NFL football. That is what the money demands. That is what the resume demands. That is what the Browns need to see. But the fact that people are even asking whether this competition is closer than expected tells you how shaky the situation has become. Dillon Gabriel adds pressure because he removes the easy excuse. With Shedeur Sanders, people can always say the attention is different. They can say Shedeur's name makes the story bigger than the football. They can say his fan base pushes every positive moment into the spotlight. But Gabriel does not carry the same kind of media storm. His presence makes the conversation more football-based. If Gabriel is also close enough to be mentioned in the same breath, then this is not just a Shedeur hype story anymore. This is a real question about Watson's level. That is why the original discussion hits so hard. They were not saying Watson has to beat out one superstar rookie. They were saying if he cannot beat out Shedeur Sanders or Gabriel, then who is going to sign him after this? That is a brutal way to frame it, but that is exactly why it feels so dangerous. Because they are not treating this like a small camp battle. They are treating it like an NFL career checkpoint. And for Watson, that is a massive problem. Because the league already knows the contract. The league already knows the injuries. The league already knows the production in Cleveland has not matched the hype. So if Watson ends up looking too close to 2 young quarterbacks who are still trying to establish themselves, that sends a message way beyond Berea. Other teams will see it. Other coaches will hear it. Other front offices will ask the same question Browns fans are asking right now. If Cleveland could not get high-level play out of him after making that kind of investment, why would anyone else believe they can fix it? That is the cold part of the NFL. It does not care how much a team once believed in you. It cares what you look like now. And right now, that is why every extra workout matters. Watson returning to Berea to get work in during the break can be framed as commitment, and it should be respected as work. But it also screams urgency. He understands the room is not empty behind him. He understands Shedeur has people watching. He understands Gabriel gives the Browns another young option to evaluate. He understands that the days of being protected purely by the size of the contract are getting harder to defend. Because at some point, the football has to speak louder than the money. That is the real issue here. Watson cannot just be slightly better than Shedeur and Gabriel. He cannot win the room by default. He cannot look average and expect everyone to clap because he showed up. He has to dominate the comparison. He has to make the Browns feel comfortable saying, there is no debate. He has to make the coaching staff look smart for giving him every chance. He has to make the fans stop hunting for alternatives. Anything less than that keeps the door open. And the longer that door stays open, the louder this gets. Gabriel's presence also puts pressure on the Browns' evaluation process. If they claim this is a real competition, then they have to reward performance. If they say it is not a real competition, then fans will accuse them of protecting Watson. That is the trap. Cleveland wants the benefits of competition without the chaos of what happens if the competition exposes the veteran. But you cannot invite young quarterbacks into the building, let them flash, and then act shocked when fans start asking hard questions. That is especially true when the veteran has not delivered enough to silence the room. If Watson had been excellent in Cleveland, Shedeur and Gabriel would simply be developmental pieces. They would be interesting but not threatening. They would be future conversation, not present pressure. But because Watson's Browns tenure has been so uneven, every young quarterback becomes a mirror. Every positive report from Shedeur becomes a question about Watson. Every Gabriel flash becomes another reason fans wonder why the expensive option still needs defending. And that is what makes this quarterback room so dangerous for Cleveland. There is no clean angle anymore. If Watson looks great, the Browns can breathe. If Shedeur looks great, the building gets loud. If Gabriel looks great too, the whole front office has to answer why the $230 million quarterback is not separating from anybody. That is not healthy competition. That is a pressure cooker. This is where the story becomes bigger than one player. It becomes about the Browns trying to manage perception while the actual football may be telling a different story. They need Watson to look like the answer because they paid him like the answer. But they also need to develop Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel without making it look like they are scared of what those young quarterbacks might reveal. That is a tough line to walk. And that is why Gabriel matters so much in this script. He is the piece that proves this is not just about Shedeur's popularity. It is about Watson's inability so far to make the quarterback conversation disappear. A veteran with that contract should not be surrounded by this many questions. He should not be part of a last chance discussion. He should not be hearing people ask who would sign him if he cannot beat out the young guys. But that is exactly where Cleveland is now. Watson came back to Berea to work, and maybe that work helps him. Maybe it sharpens him. Maybe it gives him the rhythm he needs. But the bigger message is already out there. He is not walking into camp as a quarterback with unlimited trust. He is walking in as a veteran under the microscope, with Shedeur Sanders bringing the buzz and Dillon Gabriel making the excuse harder to sell. The fifth part of this story is where Deshaun Watson stops fighting only for the Browns' job and starts fighting for how the entire NFL sees him, because that line from the discussion was not soft. They said if he cannot beat out Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel, then who is going to sign him after this? That is not just a training camp question. That is a career question. And that is why this moment feels so heavy. Watson already made the money. He already got the massive contract. He already got the franchise commitment from Cleveland. The Browns treated him like the final answer, like the quarterback who was supposed to end all the searching. But now, after injuries, uneven play, and years of frustration, people are talking about him like a veteran who may be auditioning for his next role somewhere else. That is a wild fall for a player with a $230 million deal attached to his name. But this is how the NFL works. The league does not care forever about what a player used to be. It cares about what he can still do right now. Coaches watch the tape. Front offices watch the body language. Teammates feel the command. Fans see the difference between real confidence and a name being protected. And if Watson walks into camp and still cannot clearly separate from two young quarterbacks, that tells the league something very loud. It says the Browns may not be dealing with a comeback. They may be dealing with a decline. That is why his extra work in Berea matters. It shows he knows the pressure is real. Nobody should criticize a player for working, but the timing makes it feel urgent. This is not just a veteran staying ready. This is a quarterback trying to prove he is not slipping out of the league's trust. Because once NFL teams stop believing you can elevate a room, your name alone stops carrying weight. And Watson's name already comes with complications. The contract is huge. The expectations are huge. The disappointment has been huge. So he cannot afford to look average now. He cannot afford to barely survive the competition. He cannot afford to let Shedeur Sanders become the more exciting story and Dillon Gabriel become the extra reason fans question the depth chart. Watson needs to look obviously better. Not slightly ahead. Not protected by experience, obviously better. Because if he does not, Cleveland's problem becomes bigger than one season. The Browns would have to explain why the most expensive quarterback in the room still needs defending against younger, cheaper options. And the rest of the NFL would be watching that same picture. If Watson cannot prove it in the building that paid him, why would another team rush to give him another major chance? That is the part people do not want to say out loud, but the clip said it anyway. This could be the last real chance of his career. Not because somebody hates him, not because fans are being dramatic, but because the NFL has a cold way of moving on. One year you are the name, the next year you are the question. Then, suddenly, you are the guy teams discuss only if everything else goes wrong. That is why this Browns quarterback battle is so dangerous for Watson. Shedeur Sanders does not need to be perfect to create pressure. Dillon Gabriel does not need to be a star to make the room uncomfortable. They only need to make the gap look smaller than it should be. And for a $230 million veteran, that is already a problem. And that is what makes this whole Deshaun Watson situation feel bigger than a normal training camp storyline. This is not just about a veteran quarterback returning to Berea for extra work. This is about a quarterback who once had the Browns fully committed to him, now facing the kind of pressure that money cannot block, contracts cannot silence, and team-friendly media talk cannot cover forever. Because the truth is simple. Watson has to prove it now. Not with old highlights, not with reputation, not with the size of his contract, not with excuses about timing, rust, injuries, or waiting for everything around him to be perfect. He has to prove it with football. He has to look better than Shedeur Sanders. He has to look better than Dillon Gabriel. He has to walk into that quarterback room and make the Browns feel like there is no debate left. But that is the problem. The debate is already here. And once a debate like this starts in Cleveland, it does not stay quiet. Browns fans know what bad quarterback situations look like. They have lived through too many of them. They know when a team is trying to sell patience. They know when a front office is trying to protect a decision. They know when a coach is choosing words carefully because the truth is too uncomfortable to say out loud. And right now, the uncomfortable truth is that Watson's contract is no longer enough to make people believe. That is why Shedeur Sanders is such a dangerous name in this story. He represents the thing Watson has not been able to give Cleveland consistently: hope. He is younger, cheaper, fresher, and carrying a completely different energy. Fans are watching him because they want to see if something real is there. They want to know if the Browns accidentally walked into a better story than the one they paid $230 million for. And Dillon Gabriel makes it even worse for Watson, because this is no longer just about Shedeur hype. If Gabriel is also close enough to be part of the conversation, then Watson's problem becomes impossible to spin. A veteran with that contract should not need to explain why the gap is small. He should create the gap himself. That is why this season feels like a career checkpoint for Watson. If he separates, he buys time. If he looks sharp, he quiets the room. If he wins clearly, the Browns can breathe again. But if he struggles, if the young quarterbacks flash, if Shedeur starts looking like the more exciting option, then Cleveland's entire quarterback plan turns into chaos, and the NFL will be watching every second of it. Because teams do not care how much money you used to be worth. They care what you can do now. They care if you still move the offense. They care if teammates believe. They care if the ball comes out on time. They care if the quarterback gives the building confidence. And if Watson cannot show that in Cleveland, the next question becomes brutal. Who is signing up for the next chapter? That is the real fear. Not just that Watson loses a job. Not just that Shedeur Sanders becomes the fan favorite. Not just that Dillon Gabriel makes the Browns rethink the depth chart. The real fear is that the league starts looking at Watson and says, "We already saw enough." That is when a career changes fast. 1 minute, you are the franchise answer. Then you are the expensive question. Then you are fighting for another chance. And after that, the phone stops ringing. So now the pressure is on. Watson came back to Berea, but he did not come back to a quiet building. He came back to a quarterback room full of eyes, questions, and young competition that could expose the whole thing. The Browns can protect the message. They can soften the headlines. They can talk about patience and process. But they cannot hide what happens on the field. If Watson is still that guy, he has to show it now. Because if Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel make this competition look too close, the Browns will not just have a quarterback battle, they will have a $230 million crisis. And that is why this story is not going away anytime soon. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Deshaun Watson can still prove he belongs in Cleveland? Or is Shedeur Sanders already turning this into the most uncomfortable quarterback battle in the NFL? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you are ready for this Browns drama to explode, and subscribe for more Cleveland Browns updates, because once training camp opens, this quarterback room could get messy fast.